Kennedy asked the Air Force, "Can you destroy every Soviet missile in Cuba?" The answer was no. The missiles may soon become operational, strike, and some may survive. Invade, and the war may spread. Quarantine Cuba, and the missiles stay in place. There is no safe route. Freeze the clock before 7 o'clock on October 22, 1962. Kennedy has not addressed the nation. No Soviet ship has tested an American quarantine, and no settlement exists. The president knows that Soviet offensive missiles are being installed in Cuba, close to the United States. He must remove them, stop more from arriving, protect Berlin and America's alliances, and avoid a general war. He must also preserve an exit if the first move fails. He must judge not only what each route may achieve, but what its failure would force him to do next. Our AI receives only the information available in that room. It does not know what Kennedy chose. The crisis begins with photographs, but the photographs do not produce certainty. A U-2 mission on October 14th reveals medium-range missile sites under construction. The evidence reaches Kennedy on October 16th. More flights discover more equipment, and the target list keeps changing. Some missiles may soon be ready, others may not. American intelligence cannot confirm every launcher, every warhead, every storage site, or every command arrangement. It cannot prove that every offensive weapon has been found. Readiness itself is an estimate assembled from images, construction patterns, and incomplete reports. The photographs reveal the threat, but they do not define its outer edge. That gap changes what an airstrike means. A narrow attack on the photographed launchers sounds limited. But surviving air defenses can shoot at the attackers, aircraft can retaliate, and support sites can keep the system alive. The military target list therefore expands to surface-to-air missiles, airfields, bombers, command facilities, and repeated follow-up attacks. Even then, the Air Force cannot guarantee destruction of every known missile. Success against known targets is not the same as removal of the total threat. The wider the attack becomes, the less its political label controls its military consequences. Kennedy must decide with that difference still unresolved. The Joint Chiefs see a closing window. Every hour of warning can improve Soviet readiness, disperse equipment, and weaken American surprise. If the United States eventually has to attack, waiting may make the same operation harder and bloodier. Their argument is not that nuclear war is desirable. It is that an incomplete political response may leave the military problem growing underneath it. Their responsibility is to make the military option work, not to pretend that a partial blow is sufficient. From this view, speed is a form of protection, and hesitation transfers initiative to Moscow. Then the operational briefing cuts, against the political promise of a clean strike. General Walter Sweeney explains that even a successful attack may leave known missiles intact. A serious campaign requires broad targets and follow-on sorties. Robert McNamara, here's an escalation mechanism. If the first attack cannot finish the mission, the second becomes harder to refuse. If repeated attacks still cannot verify removal, invasion becomes the next answer. The limited strike is not one decision. It is the first commitment in a chain. Operational honesty makes the supposedly limited option look larger with every question Kennedy asks. Robert Kennedy adds the moral and political cost of an American surprise attack. Dean Rusk sees the alliance problem and a Soviet opportunity in Berlin. An attack may destroy U.S. legitimacy before it destroys the missiles. But diplomacy also has a clock. The United States has missiles in Turkey and Italy, and Moscow may demand a wider bargain. Cuba has its own fear of invasion and its own armed forces. Legitimacy matters because America's allies may have to absorb the Soviet response outside the Caribbean. Every route depends on how three governments interpret the same first move. Choose before the AI does. Route A is an immediate conventional air campaign against the missiles and the defenses protecting them. Route B uses broad air preparation and invasion to seize the sites and control the island. Route C imposes a naval quarantine, continues reconnaissance, opens a controlled channel to Moscow, and keeps the attack forces ready. A uses surprise, B uses physical control, C uses time and pressure. None promises removal without creating a new danger. Which uncertainty would you accept? Make the strongest case for A. The weapons already in Cuba are the problem, and quarantine does not remove them. Surprise is available now and may disappear after a public warning. A broad conventional campaign can hit known launchers, air defenses, airfields, bombers, support sites, and command nodes before they become harder targets. Continued reconnaissance can guide follow-up sorties. If force is ultimately unavoidable, attacking earlier may reduce the capability available to answer. It also denies the defenders time to turn a visible construction project into a hidden operational force. Route A is fast, direct, and immediately executable. It treats the deployment as a military fact rather than a promise Moscow may break. Now attack its weakest assumption. The campaign works only if the target picture is complete enough. Kennedy does not know that it is. A surviving launcher, warhead, command unit, or aircraft can preserve the threat after American bombs kill Soviet personnel. Moscow can answer somewhere other than Cuba, especially Berlin. And every uncertain result creates pressure for another strike. Route A therefore reveals its central failure after the first irreversible action. Battle damage photographs may show ruined sites without proving that the missing capability is gone. The United States may spend surprise, legitimacy, and Soviet lives before learning whether the operation solved the problem. Route B answers the intelligence gap with physical possession. Air attacks suppress the defenses. Airborne and amphibious forces land, seize the known sites, search for hidden systems, and prevent reconstruction. Ground troops can inspect what photographs cannot. They do not need Moscow to admit that a missile remains. If the objective is certainty that the weapons cannot operate from Cuba, invasion offers the strongest direct mechanism. Occupation converts uncertainty into a search problem backed by soldiers. It also demonstrates that clandestine deployment cannot create a permanent strategic fact. That is the best case for B, but seizing missile sites is not the final mission. Cuban forces can disperse, conceal equipment, destroy infrastructure, and fight from territory the first landings do not control. Soviet personnel force another decision about direct combat between the superpowers. Removing the Cuban government creates an occupation problem with no short exit. Meanwhile, Moscow can retaliate where American troops are not dominant. Route B can win the battlefield in Cuba and still lose control of the crisis. It assumes geography will contain escalation. The more complete the control becomes, the further the mission travels from the original task of removing missiles. Nothing in Kennedy's evidence guarantees that assumption. Route C begins with a different question. Can the United States make the next Soviet decision visible before it starts shooting? A quarantine can stop or expose new offensive shipments. Continued flights can show whether construction ashore is slowing or accelerating. OAS and Allied support can turn a bilateral threat into a limited collective demand. A private channel can offer withdrawal without public surrender. Most importantly, the airstrike and invasion remain available. C does not discard force. It changes the order in which force is used. It purchases information with pressure rather than purchasing certainty with blood. But quarantine is neither peaceful nor complete. Ships must be identified, stopped, and possibly boarded by armed vessels. A submarine, aircraft, or local commander can create a confrontation before either capital intends one. The missiles already in Cuba remain in Cuba. Their crews can continue working while diplomats exchange messages. Every day also reduces surprise if an attack becomes necessary. Route C succeeds only if pressure creates usable time. Reconnaissance detects failure early, and Kennedy enforces a deadline. Without a clock, reversibility becomes delay, and delay can become defeat. A route designed to preserve choice can fail if no one decides when that choice must end. Now give the opponent the strongest reply. Moscow refuses immediate removal, accelerates construction, tests the quarantine with ambiguous cargo, and raises pressure in Berlin. Cuban forces resist surveillance and reject any bargain made over their heads. The Soviet reply does not need to be symmetrical to be strategically effective. No route receives the opponent reaction it wants. A faces surviving weapons after Soviet deaths. B divides American power between occupation and a wider crisis. C faces a race between diplomacy and missile readiness. The decisive test is not which route can look strongest on its first day. It is when each route reveals that its central assumption was wrong. It discovers incomplete destruction after the attack begins. B discovers uncontrolled resistance and Soviet retaliation after invasion begins. C can observe continued construction, refusal of inspection, and challenges at sea before using its strongest force. Its danger remains extreme. Its failure is simply more visible before it becomes irreversible. That difference determines whether Kennedy can correct the plan or merely intensify it. The AI chooses Route C as the first move. During the first day, publish the evidence, secure hemispheric support, impose the limited quarantine, continue reconnaissance, open a private channel, and keep the strike forces ready. Within 72 hours, demand a verifiable freeze on site work. If construction continues toward operational readiness after a clear deadline, move to the updated broad air campaign. The failure threshold is continued movement toward launch capability after a clear freeze demand and refusal of meaningful verification. Use invasion only if surviving capability cannot otherwise be removed or verified. So why did Kennedy refuse an immediate attack? Because refusing the first strike did not mean refusing force. It meant preserving the power to choose when force became necessary. Now let history return. Kennedy announced the quarantine on October 22nd while attack preparations continued. Some Soviet ships turned back, but work on the missile sites continued. On October 27th, a U-2 was shot down and Major Rudolph Anderson was killed. Kennedy resisted automatic retaliation while the private channel remained open. The public settlement exchanged Soviet missile removal for an American pledge not to invade Cuba. Robert Kennedy also privately indicated that the Jupiter missiles in Turkey would be removed. Khrushchev accepted on October 28th. Later evidence made the hidden risk even larger. Soviet tactical nuclear warheads had been in Cuba beyond the American target picture. Soviet submarines encountered by the U.S. Navy carried nuclear torpedoes that American commanders did not know about. Some dramatic accounts of individual orders remain disputed. The durable lesson is broader than one heroic person. Local men, machines, and incomplete instructions could have seized control from national leaders. Quarantine did not remove that danger. It preserved more chances to stop it. This is the escalation control test. When information is incomplete and failure is catastrophic, ask which plan exposes a mistake before the mistake becomes irreversible. Ask what new information the first move creates. Ask whether the stronger option remains available. Ask who controls the opponent's next decision and whether the opponent has an exit. Reversibility is not always restraint. If delay closes the action window, waiting becomes its own irreversible choice. Kennedy's advantage was not that he found a harmless route. It was that he chose a dangerous route that preserved another decision. Now choose again with the full record. Airstrike, invasion, or quarantine? Put A, B, or C in the comments, and name the single fact that would change your answer. History made the choice. We rerun the decision.